Bezat Hashem, today in Masechet Sanhedrin, we're going to learn the bottom of Yud Zayin Amud Bet and the top of Yud Chet Amud Aleph. And Bezat Hashem, we're going to finish the first perek. Bezat Hashem. We're going to have one section in today's learning, which is the machloket we had in our Mishnah, and we'll introduce a third opinion regarding how many people need to be in a city in order to require and to be fitting to establish there a Sanhedrin Ketana, obviously, of 23 people. Bezat Hashem, our learning today should be as a refuah shlema, a merit for refuah shlema for Yaakov ben Dinah. And we will be beginning about 10-12 lines from the bottom of Yud Zayin Amud Bet. V'kama yehei be'ir v'yehei re'uyah l'Sanhedrin me'ah ve'esrim. So let's just remember, we had in our Mishnah, at the end of the Mishnah, because really this whole parak was explaining that first Mishnah, back on Bet Amud Aleph, Bet Amud Bet actually. We had a debate as to how many people have to be in a city for it to require and to be fitting to have a Sanhedrin, a 23-person capital court. So the Tanna Kama said 120 members. That's what the Tanna Kama said. The Tanna Kama said 120. Rabbi Nechemya omer 230 keneged sarei asarot. So Rabbi Nechemya said 230, which would correspond to sarei asarot, which we'll discuss momentarily within the position of Rabbi Nechemya. So the Gemara wants to know, according to the Tanna Kama, how did they get to this number that in order to get a 23-person court, you needed 120 people in the city? So the Gemara says like this, what is the significance of 120 people? This is a fascinating sugya, because the Gemara here goes through the bare minimum amount of people that you need to have, as we'll see, like a functional city. A city that will be ruled al pi Torah in a functional way. The Gemara says like this, first of all, you need 23 corresponding to Sanhedrin Ketana, meaning you need 23 who will be the judges, 23 people in the city who could be part of that Sanhedrin Ketana. In addition, you need 3 more rows of 23 to be the students who sit in front of this Sanhedrin Ketana. God willing, we'll learn later in the Masechta, there's an idea that the Sanhedrin would have 3 rows of students. We'll see exactly what their function was, if they needed to step in perhaps. But there were 3 rows of students in front of the Sanhedrin that corresponded each one to the number of the Sanhedrin. So it's another 3 rows of 23 each in order to have a proper setup of the Sanhedrin Ketana, which means you would have 4 groups of 23 each, just the bare minimum for the court's judgment, which is 4 times 23, which is a total of 92. Harei tish'im v'tarti. So now you have a total of 92, which means we need 92 people in the city to start off with, simply for judges and the students who sit in front of them. Continues the Rabbanan, the Tanna Kama. V'asara batlanin shel beit hakneset. This is a very interesting idea. There needs to be 10 people who are called batlanin. Now, the word batlan has a very negative connotation to it. Literally, it means somebody that is idle. He doesn't do things. He's not busy. But in the context here, which is really based on a Gemara in Masechet Megillah, also, the idea is you need 10 people who are batel mimlachtan. They're not involved in work. Essentially, they're paid by the city to always be in the shuls, as the Gemara in Megillah explains to us, so that there's always a minyan. There's always a minyan. And the Gemara in Megillah actually elaborates, as Rashi quotes here. Very interesting. Rashi explains that these 10 people were batel mimlachtan. They weren't involved in work, in order that they'd be prepared always in the shul for shacharit and arvit. As the Gemara explains in Megillah, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to the Beit HaKnesset and he doesn't find 10 people, he becomes upset. And the Gemara there in Megillah teaches us, if you have a city that doesn't have these 10 batlanin, it's considered a kfar. Now, in regards to the halachot of Megillah, for those who are learning Megillah, we're learning it now actually, Baruch Hashem, in honor of Purim. And in regards to Megillah, this has halachot, which is that the kfarim, which were the outskirts, they were like the villages, the farmers, they had a special halacha that they could read the Megillah earlier than the 14th of Adar if they were coming in anyways to deliver water and food to the large city people. So the distinction between a large city and a village actually was having 10 batlanin, these 10 people, similar to a kollel in a certain way, that were established to be there for minyan in Beit HaKnesset. So Rashi finishes off and he says, therefore, if you don't have these 10 people, it's also not fitting for a Sanhedrin. I was just thinking, perhaps the pshat is, why is Rashi quoting this whole thing? Perhaps what Rashi is saying, it's also Gemara and Brachot actually. Perhaps what Rashi is saying is, I'm just thinking, is that maybe if HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want to be there, because there's no minyan, so it's like the Shekhinah leaves, Hashem's not interested, and a court, like we've spoken about, HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to be resting amongst the court, which we spoke out a few times for them to be judging properly. So maybe if you don't have the minyan there, you also can't have a court there because it won't be with the Shekhinah resting amongst it. Elokim nitzav ba'adat kel, like we've spoken about. So maybe also, if you don't have that minyan in town, it's not sufficient to have a court, even a lower court of 23 as well. Just a thought. Okay, so far we're up to 102, because we had, again, a 92, which was the 23-person court plus 3 rows of students. Plus 10 more, we said, is you need the batlanin to have the Beit HaKnesset functional. Hare may have a tray, so that's 102. Now we have to get to 120. So the Gemara continues, Vishnei sofrim, you need 2 court scribes. Rashi explains these court scribes were the ones who would write down the innocent and the guilty, and they would always be sitting in front of the court scribes, recording the events of the court. Vishnei chazanin, 2 court attendants. Rashi explains the 2 court attendants were meant to assist the court if they needed to give malkot to somebody, or if they needed to summon somebody to court. These are the 2 court attendants. Vishnei ba'alei dinin. Now, in order to have a functional city, you don't just need a court, you also need litigants. So therefore, there has to be litigants in the city, so you need at least 2 people who could possibly be litigants. Vishnei edim, now you also need 2 people who could be witnesses, because in court cases, in order to ascertain the truth of the matter, very often the proofs that we bring is from witnesses. So you need to have at least 2 more people in the city who could be witnesses. Now this gets very interesting, the Rashi explains. Vishnei zomimin, you also need 2 people who could turn those witnesses into zomimin. There has to be, it creates like a checks and balances system, very interesting, is that witnesses, when they come to testify, they have to be scared that other 2 people will come in and negate their testimony by saying you were with us. So there has to be 2 more people in town who potentially could step in and say you were with us, thus striking fear in the hearts of those first 2 witnesses. But you also need vishnei zomimei zomimin. You also need 2 more people who could be mizamim, who could negate the zomimin. Meaning to say is that the zomimin who are going to come in and testify the edim were inappropriate have to be nervous that others could come in and say, you are with us, negating their testimony. So this creates like a checks and balances system. Rashi elaborates a little more. He says, because if the litigant is found guilty based on edim, he might go and hire the zomimin to negate the witnesses. So the zomimin need to know that there's another 2 people in town who could say, you are with us, negating them. So this would lead you to a total, array meyavar beisa, would lead you a total of 114. Let's just add that all up. So we had 102 before we added this last list. Then we had 2 sofrim, 2 scribes, 2 attendants of court, 2 litigants, 2 witnesses, 2 zomimin and 2 zomimei zomin. That's a total of 6 times 2, which is another 12. So 12 plus 102 is 114. Okay, now we need 120. That's what the Tanakama and the Mishnah said would necessitate a court of 23. So the Tanya, the Gemara finishes off, the Braita elaborates and says, Kol ir she'en ba'asara devarim alalu, any city that does not have these following 10 things, ein talmid chacham rashai lador b'tocha. A Torah scholar is not allowed to live in that city. So what are those 10 things? You need Beit Din, Makin v'Onshin. You need a Beit Din that administers lashes and punishments, because that keeps people in line. Now that's already included. V'kupa shel tzedakah nigvit b'shnayim. You need a collection of tzedakah that is gathered by two people, umitchaleket bishlosha, and is distributed by three. So the Gemara explains elsewhere why you need to get collection and distribution 2 and 3, but you need 2 people who collect the tzedakah, 3 people who distribute it. Beit HaKnesset, the city also has to have the Beit HaKnesset. You can't live in a city without a Beit HaKnesset. 5, you need Beit HaMerchatz. You also need a bathhouse. Bathhouse l'chaora, it sounds like it would be for cleanliness, hygiene. 6, you also need a Beit HaKnesset, Beit HaKiseh, excuse me. You need a bathroom. Right? You need a public bathroom. You need people to be able to relieve themselves. It's a basic functioning well-being. Rofeh, you need a doctor. Now Rashi learns the doctor would give Brit Milah to the children. Very interesting. So you need a mohel in the city. Ve'uman, uman is a bloodletter. So it used to be back in the day, they understood, and they would, if somebody was sick, they would relieve them of some blood. It means they would draw some of his blood. They understood. This took out some of the illness. That was number 9. The lavlar, sorry, that was 8. Number 9 is lavlar. You need a sofer. Rashi says to write sfarim. You need somebody who could write sfarim. Now they take out the word tabach, some. We're going to go with that girsa because Rashi doesn't seem to have it. And finally, melamed tinokot, you need a school teacher, someone who could teach children Torah. That's number 10. So any city doesn't have these 10 things, Talmid Chacham is not allowed to live inside of it. It's not considered a proper city. In the name of Rabbi Akiva, they said, Af b'nei pera, you also have different types of fruits. Because these different types of fruits light up the eyes. Apparently it gives a person the healthy mentality. Fine. Now, the way Rashi explains, okay, so we need 6 more from this list. So it says Rashi, Rofeh, Uman, Lavlar, Melamed, all these last 4 things that we said, the doctor, or the mohel as we explained, the bloodletter, the sofer who wrote Sfarim, and Melamed Tinokot, the teacher of children, that's all one person. So how do we get to the number 6? So really it's from the beginning of the list, which is 2 people collect the tzedakah and 3 people distribute, which means you'll have 5 there. And then you have 1 more person who was the jack of all trades who did all of those 4 things. Rofeh, Uman, Lavlar, Melamed, Tinokot. This is a total of 6 more. Added onto the 114 we've already calculated, comes out that you need 120 people in a city for it to be a functional city and then to build a Sanhedrin of 23 inside of it. Now this is the position of Tanakama in our Mishnah. Rabbi Nechemia said you need 230. Now let's remember, why did he say you need a city of 230? So he said because in the Midbar, when Yitro suggested revamping the court system and setting up the lower courts, so he said that there has to be a sarei asarot, means there has to be officers over certain groups of people. And the lowest one was officers over 10. So based on that, the Gemara says, in order to have a Sanhedrin of 230, it has to be that each one of the members of Sanhedrin is at least in charge over 10 people. So therefore, if you have 230 people in the city, you also will have the fitting number to establish a Sanhedrin of 23. Now Tanya, the Braita says, we have a third opinion as well. Rebbe says, turning to Yirchet Amud Aleph, Matayim v'shivim v'shiva. So Rebbe says, you need to have 277 people in the city to establish a Sanhedrin of 23. Now, the Gemara asks, Tanya, but Rebbe taught in a Braita, Rebbe Omer Matayim v'shivim v'shmona. Rebbe taught you need 278. So why does he 277 and 278? It seems like a contradiction in his opinion. So lo kashya, this is not a problem. Hareb Yehuda, Harabanan. This is very interesting. The 277 parallels the position of Rabbi Yehuda regarding the Sanhedrin being 70, the great Sanhedrin. And 278 parallels the position of the Rabbanan who hold the great Sanhedrin had to be 71. How does this work? So Rashi explains is that the halacha is, if you have a court of 23, and they argue in terms of the outcome, 11 say innocent and 11 say guilty, and 1 abstains. He says, I can't adjudicate on this. So now what you need to do is you need to add another 2. Now, if you add another 2, if 2 go on either side, so then you'll be able to, meaning innocent or guilty, you could either put the person to death or acquit him, either way. But if they split again, you'll continue to add 2 until you reach the number of the size of the Sanhedrin Gdola. After that, you don't add people anymore. Now, how many more people would you have to add? So according to this Rebbe, this position, he holds, like Rabbi Nehemiah, that be'etzem, the size of a city would be 230, in order that you have each of the members of Sanhedrin, of the 23, over 10 people. However, since you would add 2 more people until the number 70 in Rabbi Yehuda's position, within the position of Rabbi Yehuda, until the 23 reaches 70, so that means you'll actually add another 47 onto the Sanhedrin until you stop adding. Meaning 23 plus 47, then you reach already the number of 70, right? Another 70. That would be already beyond that, you wouldn't add any more. So therefore, which would reach a total of for the city, therefore to have a sufficient number for this, you'll need 277, because in addition to the 230 that would necessitate 23 people, you need another 47 who could be added onto the Sanhedrin. However, according to the Rabbanan, who hold that the Sanhedrin was 71, so you'll need 1 more person, which is why you'll have a city of 278, because you'll actually add onto that Sanhedrin until you reach the number of 71. So therefore, you'll need 278 people in that city to necessitate a Sanhedrin of 23. So essentially, Rebbe holds within the position of Rabbi Nehemiah, he just holds you need more people for the additions, the add-ons, should there be a split in judgment, which would be till 70 or 71, which would be the 47 or 48 extra people, as we explained. Okay, let's go ahead. Tan Rabbanan, the Braita explains, we finish off the Perek with a calculation of how many judges existed in the desert. Now in the desert, we know, as Yitro suggested, there should be judges over certain numbers. We have judges over 10,000, we have judges over 1,000, and we have judges over 100, as well as 10. So based on our understanding that the Jews in the desert were 600,000, we can deduce also how many judges ultimately were over each of these groups. Tan Rabbanan, says the Braita, it says, you shall place over the Jews, Yitro tells Moshe, Sarei Alafim, judges over 1,000, Sarei Me'ot, judges over 100, Sarei Chamishim, judges over 50, V'Sarei Asarot, and judges over 10. Now, Sarei Alafim, judges over 1,000, sorry, I think I said 10,000 before, judges over 1,000, Sheish Me'ot, that would be 600, meaning 600 people would be appointed over 600 people would be appointed over 600,000 people, each one over 1,000 people. Sarei Me'ot, when it says judges over 100, how many would you have? You would have Sheshet Alafim. There would be 6,000 of those judges, because for each one to be in charge of 100 people, you would need 6,000 over a group of 600,000. Sarei Chamishim, officers over 50, would be Shnei Masar Elef, 12,000. 12,000 judges would mean 12,000 people over 600,000 would be 1 to 50. Sarei Asarot, judges over 10, would be Sheshet Ribo. Sheshet Ribo is 60,000, meaning 60,000 people, each one would be in charge over 10 people of the Jews if there were 600,000 Jews. Nimtzu, so if you add these numbers together, 600 plus 6,000 plus 12,000 plus 60,000, that Dayanei Israel, that the judges in the Midbar were Shiv'at Ribo, Vishmonat Alafim, 78,000, Shiv'at Ribo is 70,000, Shmonat Alafim is 8,000, so 78,000, V'Sheish Me'ot, and 600. There were a total of 78,600 judges of these courts that adjudicated the Jewish people. Hadran alach dinei mamonot, hadran alach dinei mamonot, hadran alach dinei mamonot. Baruch Hashem, we finished the first perek in Masechet Sanhedrin, and God willing, we'll pick up with the second chapter when we learn next. In the meantime, I wish everybody all the best, Shabbat Shalom, and again, all of our learning should be as a refuah shleima for Yaakov ben Dina. All the best.